hey felek saldın beni cevri cepağa hey felek saldın beni cevri cepağa derdim bulgaç yıglap deme sen bir vapağa derdim bulgaç yıglap deme sen bir vapağa.
Welcome to Window to China and Xinyu One-on-One. Today I have distinguished guest, David Broder. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm David Broder, and I'm proud to serve as the president of SEIU Virginia 512. Our members are home care providers across the Commonwealth, as well as county employees in Fairfax and in Loudoun County.
I'm so glad you're here. I joined the rally you host, so I'm so happy you're here today. So today our topic will be on income inequality and the minimum wage. So David was work very hard for the families, work especially for working families. What is inspired you to work very hard for the families? Can you tell us your experience?
Sure, thank you. I'm very inspired by my own family story. My family was able to enter the American middle class because they worked hard, yes, but also because there were smart policies in place and because they had a voice at work. They were part of strong unions, and because of what my grandparents, because of what my parents did, and the unions that they were a part of, I was able to have the opportunity to go to college. I was able to have the opportunity to have a better life.
Which college you were graduate?
So I went to Cornell University in Ithaca. And thank you. Where it was a little too snowy for me, so I'm happier to be here. But it was my grandfather was able to go to college because of the GI Bill. My grandparents on my other side were able to raise my father because when they faced discrimination at work as Jews, as state employees, the union was there to make sure that they got treated fairly. You know, my mother was a union leader and an art teacher. We had health care as children because of her and because of the contract she had. So what I want to do is make sure that everybody has the same opportunities that I had.
Great. Today is Father's Day. So talk about a little bit, your father have any influence on you?
I'm very grateful for the influence my father had, and to my father, happy Father's Day, Dad. I learned a lot from my father. I learned about the importance of family, about community, about serving others and doing good. My father's a mental health professional and a teacher and a therapist, and always really raised my brother and I to think about others and to think about what's the good that we are putting into the community.
Great. It's a happy Father's Day to your fathers also. Then I think it's the minimum wage. It's a part of the economy, also part of like the important part for the working family. What do you think the minimum wage should be?
Well, the minimum wage, if the minimum wage had kept pace with inflation, it would be $10.55. If it kept pace with productivity, which many individuals say is what wages should be tied to, it would be $22 an hour. And yet, the minimum wage is $7.25.
It's very low.
That's right. And when you think about the cost of inflation, it's getting less and less every year. And simply put, it's impossible to raise a family on $7.25 an hour. The opportunities, again, that I had are simply not available in Virginia, the 368,000 children whose parents are working very hard in minimum wage jobs.
So what do you do with the raising the minimum wage? Have you talked with congressmen in Virginia or something like that?
So we do, and a lot of folks are working very hard on this issue. The president has called to raise the federal minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, and we are talking to members of Congress about that. But we also know that things are moving very slowly in Congress. In fact, Congress is broken, as many people say. So we want the Commonwealth of Virginia to be a leader on this issue, and we worked this past General Assembly to get Virginia to take some steps to raise the minimum wage here, frankly, to keep in line with a lot of our neighbors in this region.
So why is it very hard? I know the House already passed the bill. Why is it very hard for the Senate votes pass this bill?
Sure. So the Senate did pass the minimum wage bill.
Oh yeah, I say the opposite. So.
Right, and much credit goes to Senator Dave Marsden from here in Fairfax, who was a real champion on this issue. And unfortunately, it was killed by the House of Delegates. It was killed in committee. Early one morning, they tried to do it when nobody was paying attention. And I think it's a real shame. It is about the triumph of, I think, ideology over what would benefit working families.
Yeah, speaking of the minimum wage, I think is part of like income, so inequality. What do you think the main factor affect the income inequality? That's
right. So income inequality, which is the widening gap between what folks at the very top of our society, the 1% or the 1% of the 1% make, and what the rest of us are making. This is really the issue of our times, and I think there's broad agreement on that. Just the other day, the CEO of Goldman Sachs talked a lot about income inequality. He was worried about it having a destabilizing impact. And so I think folks from across the spectrum agree on this. The Tea Party and the Occupy movement, they both talk about income inequality. So there's disagreement on how to address it, but I think there is more and more attention to this being an issue that we have to focus on.
Yeah, that's the reason to become like the movement again right now. That's the part of the reason.
That's right, and there is a real movement, as you say, to address this, and there's a real movement on raising the minimum wage that's taking part in states and cities across the country. And I am really inspired by that. There's a sense of hopelessness sometimes in Washington, D.C., that our Congress is too polarized and we're not going to get anything done. And so you're seeing a movement of small business owners, of labor, of faith community coming together across the country and saying, if D.C. is not going to address this problem, then we're going to raise the minimum wage and we're going to address income inequality in our communities, whether that's a city, a county, or a state.
Do you think the raising the minimum wage can cause an employment rate? Because some of them argue about that.
Yeah, there are a lot of myths, I think, that opponents of the minimum wage put out there. And that's one of them, that raising the minimum wage will cost jobs. And yet the studies don't back that up at all. And the people who say that it will, they know that. They're trying to scare the rest of us. But studies show that, in fact, there is little to no impact on job loss by raising the minimum wage. And in fact, there are several studies by EPI that show if we did raise the minimum wage to $10.10 across the country, it would result in 140,000 new jobs. Because when you raise the minimum wage and you put more money into the pockets of hardworking people, they turn around and they spend it. It's going straight to rent, it's going straight to groceries, it's going right back into our community. And it's that kind of increased consumer demand that results in new jobs. So from that point of view of economic development, raising the minimum wage is incredibly powerful. We can create 140,000 new jobs without a single extra taxpayer dollar. And so I think you have to ask, why are we not doing that?
Wow, I agree. So consumers can build up the very good circle. When they have money, they spend immediately. So I think the rich, they get the richer, but the middle class is struggles. That's part of problem. I can see the middle class families, they are don't have less hope to moving up economically. What do you think?
I think that's exactly right. Our country was at its best when we had a strong middle class. In the 3 decades after World War II, that's when America was leading the world and we had a strong middle class. That's when my parents were able to go to college. That's when local economies were strong and towns were thriving. And it's really over the last 3 to 4 decades that we've seen a different kind of economy, where, as you say, those at the top are doing very well, but it's entirely disconnected from the rest of us. Wall Street is doing just fine, as they say, but Main Street is really suffering.
My next question is, are the rich getting wealthy? That's because of tax breaks?
That is a big part of it. The wealthy are using their political influence, they're using their money to pass tax loopholes after tax loopholes. And so what we're seeing in this country is that the way to make money now is not through work. It is through the accumulation of wealth and by changing the tax code. And so the way to make money is by having offshore tax accounts. The way to make money is by hiring lobbyists and going to DC and rewriting the rules. And so the way to succeed in this country is no longer hard work. And that's what's really scary. America has always been the place where you could come and through hard work you could have a better life for yourself and your children. And I'm very worried thinking about my daughter and the future that she faces, that may not be true anymore.
Mm-hmm. Do they lobby like Congress, then they take advantage of the policies or regulations? That's correct?
That's exactly right. And we're talking about the super wealthy here, right? We are talking about the 1% of the 1%. Have huge influence in our politics. They have huge influence in the way we legislate. And the number of lobbyists that they are able to hire and the power that they exercise is just so far beyond anything that you or I could ever have. And it's one of the reasons why labor unions are so important. Mm-hmm. Often people ask me, we have the weekends now, we no longer have child labor. Do we really need unions anymore? And the truth is now we need them more than ever. They are the only way that working people can come together and have the collective power to push back and try to balance out our system.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of the progressive tax? Should the richer people pay more tax than other people?
Right now we have an incredibly regressive tax structure here in Virginia, all the more so. And through the variety of loopholes, and we don't always talk about this, what we're seeing in this country is that the poor are subsidizing the rich. Through all sorts of tax loopholes that they're able to write for themselves. We're seeing massive redistribution of wealth. That's true. The right wing often complains about this, but it's not from the wealthy to the poor. It's from the poor to the wealthy. And so right now in Northern Virginia, the working class families have an incredibly high tax burden because our tax is so regressive. So I think it's important not only for families, it's important for our entire economy that we have a much more progressive tax structure.
I remember during 1950, that time, around that time, the highest tax the people paid. What do you think why that time is the highest tax they should pay?
I think there was an understanding in the 50s that we were all in this together. They talked about the virtuous circle of business culture in America. There was the idea that you paid your workers a living wage, and that they in turn used that money and put it right back into the economy, and that consumer demand created new jobs. It spurred new research and development, and thus the virtuous circle of how do we prosper as a nation. And we've gotten away from that, and now it is all about very short-term, short-sighted economic gains, where how do you keep as much of your taxes as possible? How do you maximize shareholder returns for this year only? But we're not thinking about the long term, and so that's one of the reasons we're seeing income inequality be at record levels and getting worse.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. The minimum wage should be the part of economy in the discussion. So why has the stock market risen since the Great Recession, but household income has fallen?
That's a great question, and I think that touches on a lot of what we're talking about here. If you have enough money to really invest in the stock market, and I'm not talking about a couple of shares, we're all invested in one way or another, but if you're really putting hundreds of thousands, millions into the stock market, you're doing just fine. But if you are working for the minimum wage, and the average minimum wage worker is a woman, she's in her late 20s or older, she's working full-time, a quarter of minimum wage workers are parents, they're trying to get a better life for their kids, you don't have money to invest in the stock market. And so there's a real disconnect between how the stock market is doing and how working families are doing. I think we're also seeing a strategy that a lot of companies are doing well in the stock market. They're maximizing their short-term profits by outsourcing jobs or cutting jobs back here. And that may be fine for their shareholders right now, but it's devastating for our economy.
Yeah, I think a lot of problem you mentioned. For the working family, probably like $15 per hour. That is limit, like the minimum wage for them for living. But now they only, get the full-time job, but it's not enough for their support their family.
That's exactly right. And one thing that many of us are very worried about is when you look at the economy and where we're headed. 7 of the 10 fastest growing jobs in our economy make less than $15 an hour. So the economy is growing, that's right, but the jobs that we're building are not good jobs. And it's not simply, people often think of fast food workers, but it's much more broad than that. Healthcare professionals, home care workers, adjunct professors. Are
like
all
teenagers, students, they need paid, college tuition fee. I think the tuition fees keep going up.
That's right, that's right. Somehow we have an economy where college is getting beyond the reach of most working families, and yet adjunct professors are living in poverty. So we've got to figure out how we get back to that virtuous circle in our economy. We've got to figure out how we make the economy work for everybody.
What about if the workers get the paid far below the minimum wage, where they should complain?
And that happens all the time. It's incredibly common. People don't get paid for their work. Or what we're seeing more and more is what they call wage theft. We're seeing this across the fast food industry, where 89% of workers in the fast food industry are victims of wage theft, which means they're asked to do work before they punch in, or after they punch out, they're told that they have to stay and clean up the restaurant or they're going to lose their job. And so this is a huge issue, and there's a lot that we need to do on this. If you are a member of a union, then you have that collective action that you and your coworkers can take. But we know because of the attack on unions, fewer and fewer individuals are in unions these days. And so one thing we need to do as a community is support the rights of workers to organize. The other place that you could go if you are not getting paid would be the state, the Department of Labor and Industry. And what is so shocking is that our last governor, Bob McDonnell, eliminated every single staff person who worked on these issues, so that under the McDonnell administration, if you weren't paid, you had literally no one to turn to. And we're very proud that Governor McAuliffe is working to restore that so that you do have a place to go.
You did a great job too. I joined the rally sometime you host. Then I heard about it many times. You said, I fight for the families. So you become, what makes you become a fighter for the families?
I never set out to be, and yet that's what the times call for. I think if we are going to sit back and politely let these economic trends continue, then we're going to see America in decline. We're going to see an economy that gets worse and worse every year. And so, I come from a long line of people who fought very hard for their families. I think about my grandfather, who I spoke to this morning to wish him a happy Father's Day. He went off to war to fight, to defend our country, not because he wanted to, but because that's what the times called for. And so I think today the times call for us to fight for a better economy, because if we don't, then our children are going to have a worse life than we have.
What do you think? Do you have any analysis on the racial problem related to raising minimum wage? Absolutely.
The minimum wage and the rise of minimum wage jobs are disproportionately impacting people of color. So African Americans, Latinos are much more likely to have minimum wage jobs. And it is, again, as the CEO of Goldman Sachs, hardly a progressive, said this has a huge destabilizing impact on our economy. And I think it really threatens the very nature of our country when we start to build a country of haves and have-nots. And it is impacted by race and by class. It's a very dangerous place for us to get to.
Do you think this is keeping the minimum wage very low could cause the other social problem too?
Absolutely, and I hope we never get there. But I think you look at what is happening in Europe and around the country, and when the economy does not work for people, then countries fall apart. We've seen this from Greece to Egypt, and there are a lot of factors. But one factor that often doesn't get talked about enough is that the economy is not working. And so when there aren't jobs, when it doesn't pay for people to go to work, then you have a real problem in the economy. I just spoke with someone who works at a fast food restaurant, and they spend their entire paycheck just getting to work, to fill up their car and to drive for a 3 or 4 hour shift if they're lucky. Then that person has to ask, well, why do I have this job? And again, if working doesn't pay, then we have to really ask, where are we headed as a nation?
Who are the majority group in Virginia in a lower wage they earn?
So as we talked earlier, we talked about the sort of myths. And one myth that big business interests put out there is that minimum wage workers are all teenagers. And that's incredibly not true. 12% of folks who are working for the minimum wage are teenagers. So they are overwhelmingly, they are your friends and your neighbors. They are 56% of them are women, 88% are 20 or older. Again, a third are married, a quarter are parents. 44% of minimum wage workers in this country have some college education. So in fact, this generation of minimum wage workers is the absolute best educated we've ever had. So it's not simply a matter that these are teenagers or people who aren't educated or aren't working hard. So we have to get past that, and we have to come together and demand that every job, if you are willing to work hard, that every job is going to be a job you can live on.
That is true. I think for college students, they graduate, but they don't have a job to work for.
That's right.
So can you summarize the minimum wage related to the economy? What's the impact on that?
Sure. Study after study shows that raising the minimum wage has a tremendous economic boost. EPI, again, did a study and shows that if we raise the federal minimum wage to $10.10, which isn't enough, by the way.
Mr. President Obama kind of proposed that
That's
proposal, right?
That's right. He has proposed and is fighting for it hard, and we don't think it'll get through Congress. But if we did so, 30 million workers in this country would see a raise. $51 billion in extra wages would be generated and 140,000 jobs created. If we did so in Virginia, 500,000 people would be affected directly, and we'd have $1.2 billion extra pumped into our economy. Seattle, what's wonderful about this movement is it's not just states, cities are leading the way. Seattle just is phasing in over the next decade a minimum wage of $15, and independent studies show that that will pump $500 million into their economy. So every family in Seattle, whether they make the minimum wage or not, is going to benefit from this increase. Meanwhile, in Virginia, our economy is stagnated, and we are suffering directly because of the lack of action of the General Assembly. So they did not pass the minimum wage increase, but I hope all your viewers will call their legislators in Richmond and demand that they come back in a special session, that they come back next year and they pass an increase in the minimum wage.
Oh, I think we have great discussion. Thank you for joining us. So today is Father's Day. Also, David's birthday just passed 2 days ago. Then I wish him a happy belated birthday, and to everyone's happy Father's Day. Yeah, thank you for watching. We will see you next time. Enjoy the music and pictures of David's family. His daughter and his wife, they have a lovely family. Thank you for watching.